So what I thought would be important is like, first of all, like, let's talk about what emotional vulnerability is for a man. I mean, we could talk about it for everyone, but specifically to men. What do you feel like emotional vulnerability looks like?
Yeah, this is such a big question. I think it's your ability to be authentic and truthful about how it is you're actually feeling. Look, we are not responsible for how things, people, experiences make us feel. We're responsible for how we react to it. And, I think that the expression of our feelings is something that we wrestle with. I like to say that we have a very, very narrow window of emotionality with respect to male emotion. And this is when we probably get people writing in saying, cue your male fragility. And to that I say, fuck off. Because we do have a bit of fragility. We don't know our ass from a hole in the ground with respect to how we're supposed to process our feelings, because societally we have not been shown by our fathers and our fathers before them to how to process our emotions. As Brene Brown tells this story that I always screw up. I was telling the story on John Kim's podcast yesterday, and I think I fucked it up, but I'll tell it here anyway.
Nice name drop, by the way.
I know. Look at what I did. Because I was on that.
Hi, John. If you watch,
he's not watching us. So Brene Brown was at a book signing, and this woman comes up. She's got 4 books, one for herself and one for her 3 daughters, each of her 3 daughters. And she gets the book signed, and she walks away, and she's with some man who's clearly Brene thinks that's obviously her husband. And they're having some sort of back and forth. And the man, you hear him say, no, I'm going to say something. I'm going to say something. And he walks past his wife and goes up to Brene Brown and says, so I noticed you don't write a lot about men. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I don't. I write about women. And he goes, well, that's convenient, because we have shame too. Mm-hmm. And I have 3 women in my house that would just as soon watch me die upon my white horse than watch me fall off. Mm-hmm. Do you know?
That story gets me every time.
That's true. Mm-hmm. That's how it feels. And, it's like we have this window of emotionality. If we go above the top pane, if you will, of that window, we end up in rage. We end up in doing and saying things we have to apologize for later. We end up being the pariahs of our culture, of our society, of our family. If we go below the bottom pane of that window, we end up where I just was, where you're feeling something that even in that moment, I wanted to choke back how it was I was feeling, right? Because it was the truth. And when we go below that bottom pane, we're worried that we're going to not be masculine. We're not going to be sexy. This is one of my rather crass clients said, this is where the pussification starts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Geez.
Yeah. It's an awful term, right? But like, that's awful. The term he used. It's awful, but it's descriptive. Because that's his fear, that's how I'll be seen, that this is where the ick factor kicks in. Mm-hmm. And so, I've been particularly emotive and truthful, honest, and authentic about my feelings and my emotions over the course of the past, what is it now? How many years has it been? 23?
Yeah.
How have you dealt with that? How is that still sexy? How is that okay?
Well, first of all, I don't know why it's not sexy. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, okay. Why someone being emotional isn't sexy. And I've watched you over the years. Like, I always know when you're hitting that pain, that bottom pain, like sometimes your instinct is to take a sip of water, to do something to
block it,
stop the flow. Like, and I've even said, why did you do that?
And I sometimes hate it when you do that.
I know. And you said, why don't you just let me be? And I'm like, but that's me saying, like, I'm here for it. I'm totally here for it. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it's beautiful. And what I notice is when we're watching a movie, and there's an emotional moment, my kids aren't watching me. Sometimes they look at you first to see how you're reacting, and
It's
then they'll look
crazy.
at me second. They're always looking at you. And there's a moment where they go complete their bodies go silent when they
They
see
go,
you have tears in your eyes.
yeah,
And it's like their breath is like caught. Like they're aware that you're moving through something, and I love that you don't hide it. But and they need that model. They need to know like
this is okay.
this is okay. This is okay. So it's really beautiful, but when we were talking about this topic, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand. And I will be honest, the only time I'm a little uneasy when you show an emotion is if it's fear. Because to me, you're always this like big, strong guy who in our experience, like there's so many things that you can navigate. I grew up with a father who was not strong, who was very afraid, who I
Mhm.
saw as a coward, and you've always had this strength. And when you become afraid, like I've noticed and I've gotten so much better, but it used to be like, oh my god, if he's afraid, then
Mhm.
shit's about to hit the fan. But what I've learned when you finally admitted that you had trauma,
Mm.
don't tell anybody,
I had to admit it to
because for a
myself
long
first.
time.
Okay.
What'd you say?
I didn't, I was such an idiot. I was like, trauma. I don't have trauma. Maybe you. You guys do. All of you have trauma. I'm good.
Seriously, like I knew you had trauma, but you weren't really you weren't no, not weren't really. You weren't admitting it for years. So
No.
I didn't see a lot of this fear that as you've gone deeper with yourself and come to understand your trauma, you've started expressing more of your fear. And I
Mhm.
have to admit, it's taken me a moment to kind of reorient to like, oh, he gets to be afraid. And that doesn't mean the world's falling apart. Like I can be the strongest person in the room when he's afraid. Because
Right.
for so long, I was the most afraid person in the room.
Right.
Right.
Mhm.
So I want to be honest about that. That was an emotion that I had to learn to hold in a bigger way. And
Mhm.
now when you become afraid, like I'll notice I was like, ooh, and then I go, he's allowed to be afraid. Like, of
Mhm.
course he's afraid. This is
Mhm.
unsettling.
Mhm.
And then I can hold the ground. I can hold myself and I can hold space for you.
Right.
I don't know if I answered your question.
I'm not sure you did, but I like what you said.
Oh, well,
Um,
you said, "Well, how does it make me feel?" And I
I
said,
said,
"I
well,
loved it."
how have you dealt with it? Like, how has that been for you over the course of the? Because I've been quite emotive.
Um, I love it. I
Mhm.
think it's I need, emotional honesty and authenticity. When there
Mhm.
is not that emotional connection, I just kinda, like there's nothing there for me. That's how I thrive. I thrive on conversations. I thrive on going deeper. I don't want you to hold all that stuff to yourself. I wanna know.
Mhm.
Like, that kind of clarity and depth and openness is, like it's like food for a relationship.
Mhm.
It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, when you get sad, it doesn't bother me.
Well,
I
and
wanna hear more.
well, as you say that, and you've been my rock all these years, because you have created that space, that overly used term that container we say, as we say in therapy, right? You have created that space where I could sew up my wounds,
Mm,
and that has brought me closer to you. You
mm,
know, I'm not ashamed of the feelings that I've expressed. Uh, you've held them so exquisitely, and you've given me that space. And because I'm not ashamed of them, because of probably because of the way you've held it, and said it's okay for you to dip below that line. I'm still gonna find you sexy. How could you not? Um,
exactly. And
and
what does emotional expression have to do with sexuality? I don't understand. Like, that just doesn't make sense
I
to
think
me.
it makes people feel like they're soft. It's the ick factor that they talked about in that show, that they're soft, they're not manly, they're not staying in their masculine frame.
I'm
And I'm not.
sorry, someone who's emotionally intelligent and expressive is the sexiest to me.
Mm.
Like, that is sexy. That's what has always made you sexy. From our first conversation, you dipped below the surface and asked me questions and shared pieces of yourself, and I was like it was like oxygen to me that I'd been looking for.
Mhm.
It's something that's always made me attracted to you, is your willingness to go there, to connect from
Mhm.
the heart.
Yeah.
Grew up with emotionally unavailable men. There is nothing sexy about a macho, emotionally unavailable man
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
me.
Yeah.
And I know you get projected on a lot, that you're probably just a little macho and like tough and everything, and you're probably not
What,
soft, but you're a
what was
teddy
that?
bear.
What was that one? We had that. I'm not outing anybody. We were drawing some tarot cards or something, and someone who had never met me before, except for that day, someone that you knew, she drew a card, and then she started talking about the feminine, and she immediately said, "Well, first of all, there's nothing feminine about you," which I
Right.
thought
You
was
get a
an
lot of
interest.
that.
I get a lot of that projection.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about like masculine frame, I think there needs to be a defining of what does the masculine frame mean, because I think that when we start to look at redefining it, people get really panicky, like, oh, you're going to ask me to, and you hear things like, find your feminine, and that's going to create a lot of problems for men, a lot of men. I'm sorry, I just think that most men are going to be like, okay, tell me when it's over. I'm
Right.
not doing that. And
Right.
so I want to kind of blow that idea up,
Mhm.
that you don't have to, like, whatever that means for you. That's not what that means.
Right. That's
That's not
exactly. It
right.
doesn't mean you're gonna
No,
like.
you just become more of a holistic human being when you're able to tap into those more to some of those softer, more vulnerable, more open-hearted feelings, right? And so it's not about like, finding your divine feminine or whatever that fear creates in someone. It's about touching into feelings that go beyond knuckle dragging ape, that are authentic, true, and open hearted.